Hey everyone, Aaron Davis from FCP Euro, and today I'm going to show you how to replace your water pump on an EA888 Gen 2 2.0T engine. This engine is prone for coolant leaks. It's actually equipped with a plastic coolant pump from the factory. Here at FCP Euro, we have a kit right here. It's actually an updated graph metal pump where it actually won't leak as much as the plastic one. It includes new hardware, a new O-ring, with a new coolant crossover pipe, and of course 50/50 mix G13 coolant. This water pump tends to leak from the gasket or the gasket actually around the thermostat, as the thermostat sits inside of the water pump housing on this. This car behind me actually has 65,000 miles. It's not leaking coolant, but however, they're so known for leaking coolant, it was time to replace it just for preventative maintenance. So now that you know what the kit includes, now let's look at the tools you're going to need to do this repair. The tools you're going to need to replace your water pump are a variety of ratchets from 3/8 to 1/2 inch, 3/8 torque wrench, several extensions from 3/8 to 1/4 inch, a mirror, a magnet, a 13mm wrench, 24mm socket to crank over the crank, a 13mm socket, 10mm socket, 7mm socket, T30, M10 triple square. I also use a wobble, a flathead screwdriver, a 90-degree hook pick, hose clamp pliers, a wire brush, and a mallet. Now that you know the tools we're going to need, let's get started. So now it's time to remove the under tray. It's held in by T25, so we're going to work around it. So now that it's loose, this one's, make sure they're all loose to make sure it comes out. Push down a little bit and just slide out like that. All right, so now we're gonna drain the coolant. Here's the valve right here. You're gonna use some pliers. Loosen the coolant cap because you want to release pressure in the coolant system before draining it. You're gonna twist it. It's gonna come out right out of that nipple. All right, so now that the coolant's drained, you can go ahead and remove the cap out of the way. You're gonna take a 90-degree hook pick. You're gonna pull this clip up. Yank the hose off. I always put the clip back in so you don't lose it. Same for the coolant line behind the reservoir. Pull it up. So now we're going to remove the throttle body hose. It's held in by a flathead or a 7mm. Now we're going to loosen the throttle body hose from the throttle body. But I'm going to unplug the throttle body just so I can get easy access to the bolt. Once again, it's a 7mm or a flathead. All right, so now that the bolt is undone, I'm gonna use a 90-degree hook pick. Pry it in there, but be careful you don't make a hole in the hose. And you're gonna work your way around. Now that's off. Now I'm gonna proceed to take the other end off. That one's on there too. Same trick with the 90-degree. Just wiggle it back and forth. Now the throttle body pipe is off. So now I'm going to remove the 10mm holding on the coolant reservoir. So now that the 10mm are removed, you can grab the bottom of the reservoir, just pull up. And you're going to see this coolant level sensor right here. Push in, do the tab, and wiggle it out. Now I'm going to undo the lower reservoir hose. Use a 90-degree hook pick. You want to be careful you don't lose the clip. That's released. I'm going to wiggle it out. It's always a good idea to have a catch can down there to catch coolant if coolant comes out. Now the reservoir is removed. So now I'm going to unplug this sensor. There's a gray safety tab. You pull out, push in, squeeze, pull out. There's a clip right here. Free up out of the way. So now we're going to go ahead and remove the throttle body. The T30s are kind of hard to get to, so I'm going to show you a trick using a mirror. So you're going to use the mirror with a light source and try to find the T30. Now I'm gonna do the other rear T30. You can see that from the side, so I don't use a mirror on this one. And now we're gonna move the front two T30s. Move the last bolt, and now your throttle body's out. So now the throttle body's removed, I'm gonna use my 90-degree hook pick to unclip the harness from the bracket. Now I'm gonna disconnect all those connectors. You can actually slide them out. I push in, clip it, pull back. Just so I can free up the harness more. There's a connector right here for the purge valve. Slide in, pinch, pull it back. So now that the sensors are unplugged, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the bracket that holds them in. There's two T30s. So now we're gonna disconnect this coolant hose that goes to the water pump. I'm gonna use a 90-degree hook pick. Push the clip back in. Now we just move this line out of the way. All right, so now we're gonna move the lower coolant hose to the water pump. Use a 90-degree hook pick. Pull the clip out. Now the same thing like you did for the upper one. Wiggle it. I push this coolant line out of my way. All right, so now we're gonna unclip the harness with a 90-degree hook pick from this bracket, which is the intake manifold bracket. Now I'm gonna use an M10, and then I'm gonna take a 13. Take the 13 off. And then I'm gonna take the M10 off, triple square, push the bracket down, and rotate it out of the way. Now I'm gonna undo this T30 for the coolant line. So now I'm gonna remove this coolant pipe right here that goes to the coolant crossover pipe. I use these special pliers to get to the hard angle. Wiggle the clamp off. So now that I have the clamp removed, I'm gonna use a 90-degree hook pick. You're gonna work your way like this. This one's actually complying with me. Pull that off. All right, so now I'm gonna take the heater core hose off of the black coolant crossover pipe that goes into the water pump. Use a 90-degree hook pick. The heater core hose is being stubborn right now, so I'm gonna use a really long flathead. I'm gonna look to make sure it's on the trim of the hose. Then I'm gonna use a mallet. So sometimes that hose just needs a little bit of love. So now I'm gonna disconnect this sensor right here above the coolant pipe. Get that connector out of the way. Now we're gonna move the bottom T30 for the coolant pipe that goes to the water pump. Now we're gonna move the last T30 for the coolant pipe. It's towards the back. Now we're gonna pull off the pipe. Just wiggle it. Now the coolant pipe's removed. All right, so now we're gonna remove the water pump belt cover. It's held in by two T30s. I'm gonna do the top one first. So now that bolt's removed, you can actually grab the belt cover, slide it up. So now we're gonna take the belt off with a 90-degree hook pick. I'm gonna unplug this sensor right here. Use a 90-degree hook pick to help me get it out. And now you're gonna pull this red safety tab out. You go in here, squeeze it. Now that's out. All right, so now it's time to remove the 5 T30s holding the water pump assembly. Starting with the top one closest to the belt. So now all T30s are removed. Now we can pull the water pump out. Now the water pump's off. All right, so the next step is you're gonna wanna clean the block. Make sure it's nice and clean so you can actually apply the new gasket. So you don't want any coolant leaks after doing all this work. Just using a brush, just lightly brushing all the old goop off. And now we're ready to install the new water pump. So now I'm going to show you how to install the union into the water pump. You're going to want to take a lubricant that's safe for rubber, go around both O-rings, find the port where the union goes in, flip upside down, make sure it's straight and not cockeyed, and push. And now the union's installed. Make sure you always use lubricant for the O-ring that's safe for rubber. If you try to force this in, it's easy to rip the seal. I found it easier to actually use a hard table, make sure the union's level, and you push down evenly to make sure the seal is sealed correctly. And now we're going to head over to the car and install the water pump. So here we have the new water pump. This hole right here, and then this hole right here are actual holes for the dowel points on the actual block. You want to make sure to see that the pins are actually through these holes to make sure that the water pump is actually installed correctly. So now I'm going to go ahead and install it. Make sure all the wiring that was above the water pump is snaked above it. You don't want to install it and then realize that one of the harnesses is not where it's supposed to be. Okay, so now it's time to slide the union into the oil cooler. Like this. And now we're looking for the dowel points. I'm going to take one T30 so it doesn't move. Now I'm going to go around the whole water pump and put all the T30s back. So a trick I'm going to use is I'm going to grab a thin piece of paper towel, put it over the T30, and then press the bolt onto it. Okay, now that they're all hand tightened, I'm going to go around and torque them to 9 Newton meters. Start with the center one, go to the very bottom one, now go to the 2 T30s next to the sensor, go to the bottom T30 next to the sensor, now go to the very top one. Now they're all torqued. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to put the belt on. I'm going to grab a 1/2 inch ratchet and then a 24 millimeter socket. This is for the crank. I'm going to rotate the crank clockwise. Don't rotate it counterclockwise because you can risk putting your engine out of time. So you snake it down. Here we go. So I have it onto the crank. I'm going to hold pressure on it. I'm going to go over to the water pump belt. You're going to stretch it over the fins like this. You're going to crank the engine over while applying pressure with your hands. And now the belt just slipped on. So now we're going to slide the cover back on for the water pump belt. You just have to wiggle it back into place like that. So there's 2 bolts. The shorter T30 goes on top. Now the longer one goes down here. And now we're going to tighten both T30s by hand. No torque on these, just don't go crazy because all it is a plaster cover. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and plug in the water pump. Push it in here to click. Push in the red safety tab. Since that's plugged in, we can go ahead and install the new black crossover pipe. All right, so here we have the new coolant crossover pipe. It comes with a new O-ring. I just dipped my finger in coolant just to lubricate it so it slides into the water pump. So move the harnesses out of the way. Plug it, put it into the hole, the water pump like this. Now I'm going to install the bottom T30 for the pipe. I'm going to do the same trick. I take a little piece of paper towel, push it into the T30. Make sure you don't hit on any of the harness. I like to leave this one a little loose, just so you can move this pipe to put the last T30 in. And then we're gonna go back and just hand tighten the T30s. No torque on these, just be really careful. It's a plastic pipe and you do not want it to crack. So now I'm gonna plug back in this coolant line. It goes underneath the harness right here. Just slide it on, like that. Grab some pliers, squeeze the clip, lock it onto the coolant pipe. Now we're gonna plug in the lower coolant pipe that goes to the bottom of the water pump. You wanna hear it click, and it slides in. That's plugged in. All right, so now we're gonna plug in the upper coolant pipe for the water pump. And you wanna hear that. Give it a tug, make sure it doesn't come out. And now that's installed. Now I'm gonna plug this sensor back in. Just have to move the harness around a little bit. That's plugged in. Now I'm gonna install the intake manifold bracket. And then we're gonna come back and torque them. All right, we're gonna torque the M10 triple square to 20 Newton meters. And now we're gonna torque the 13 to 10 Newton meters. And now that's torqued. Now I'm gonna plug this sensor back in and I'm gonna clip the harness to the intake manifold bracket. Now we're gonna reinstall the throttle body. I'm gonna put the first bolt through the hole. All right, so the bottom T30s are a little challenging, so definitely take your time. I'm gonna use the same trick I've been using with the towel. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and torque the T30s. Now the throttle body's torqued. So now we're gonna install this bracket that holds in a bunch of sensors. It goes to the intake manifold. You're gonna wanna hand tighten both T30s. No torque on these, just don't go crazy because it is just a plastic bracket. So hand tight is perfectly fine. So now I'm gonna plug in the sensors into the bracket and slide them into place. And also plug in the purge valve again. All right, so now I'm gonna put the T30 back into this bracket that goes to the intake manifold. Just hand tight. Now we're gonna plug in this sensor, push in the gray tab, and before you plug in the throttle body, we're gonna install the throttle body pipe. I'm gonna put the bottom one in first at the intercooler. Just push it in. You may have to wiggle it a little bit. Now we're gonna plug it in to the throttle body itself. Wiggle it up. Now I'm going to tighten the clamps with a 7mm. If you do not have access to a 7mm, you can always use a flathead. That one's not going anywhere. And now we can go ahead and plug in the throttle body. And now we're gonna plug back in the coolant reservoir. So now we're gonna install the coolant reservoir. I always like to plug in the sensor first, the coolant levels sensor. We're gonna plug in the bottom hose and see this rivet right here. It's gonna plug into here, right into the frame rail. And also don't forget to align these two tabs with these holes. So I'm gonna look for the rivet. Push down. Now I'm gonna tighten both 10s. We're just gonna hand tighten them. No torque on these, just holding on a plastic reservoir. So don't go crazy. Now I'm gonna plug in this coolant line. Now we're gonna plug in this top coolant line. All right, so now we're gonna plug in the heater core hose that goes into that coolant cross pipe for the water pump. All right, so everything's buttoned up. It's time to fill the system with G13 coolant and turn the car on, make sure there's no leaks, and see how the car runs. I'm gonna take the coolant reservoir cap off. We're actually gonna vacuum fill the coolant system. We have a U-View coolant system filler, which has a cone, which is going to be a seal. We're going to plug the air in because we're using an air compressor. You want to make sure that this valve is closed, this blue one. You're going to hit this button. Okay, we can go ahead and plug the air. And you can see that the gauge is actually in the green, so that means that there's good seal in the cooling system. We're going to take G13. It's 50-50 mix, so there's already water in it, which is why it says do not add water, because usually when you buy coolant, you have to add water. So now in the U-View, there's a screen. You're going to put the hose with the screen, and you're going to go ahead, and put it in the coolant jug. And that blue valve that I mentioned before that's closed, you're going to go ahead and open it. This is what's actually going to suck the coolant. All right, so we use the U-View to vacuum fill it. Most of it, I'm just gonna top the coolant. Okay, it's at the max line. We're gonna put the cap on. As you can see, it's a pretty straightforward job to replace your EA 888 Gen 2 2.0T engine water pump. Today I did use a lift. You do not have to use a lift. You can also do this at home in your driveway with some jack stands. I hope you found this video very helpful. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment box below. And as always, I'll see you soon.